How's it going, guys? Normally, I do AMD videos on this channel, but today we got an NVIDIA GPU. And I'm actually genuinely excited. And that's because I have been doing AMD GPUs pretty much non-stop. I've done one NVIDIA GPU on this channel, and it was the 3060. And the last time I rocked an 80 series GPU was the 1080. So, I mean, this is a whole 4,000 bigger, right? Okay, jokes aside, I am actually genuinely excited to really see what the other side has to offer and also compare this against the 7900 XTX feature to feature. We're talking FSR, DLSS, all that stuff. But that's going to come a little bit later. Today, we got to get this out of the box. We got to put it in a PC, and I'm going to be putting it in a D31 by Johnsbow. And I love that case, but I'm not sure this is gonna fit. It on paper it will. I have a tape measure just to see if it fits, but we're gonna have to get out of the box first. So let's get right into that. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfie. You're watching GreaterThanPie, and today we're gonna be unboxing the RTX 4080 Super. Now this GPU is fascinating for a couple reasons. One of them being that its pricing is speculated to be the way it is because of AMD. The 7900 XTX launched for the price of $1,000, where the 4080 was like $1,200. And that extra $200 did actually make a pretty big difference when the 7900 XTX was more or less the same performance as the original 4080. This is where the Super kind of comes in as a interesting refresh, because it is actually MSRP the same as the 7900 XTX. The 7900 XTX does have an advantage right now in price due to the fact that it's a bit older and there's a lot of old stock, so you can actually get them for about $800 these days. I was also able to pick this one up close to MSRP. There was a small premium, but you'll see why. So up top, we definitely have a big old Gigabyte packet. And that comes with a warranty card, graphics card quick install guide, and an explanation on how to use the bracket. Oh my. I have a feeling that this is going to be a bit more complicated than I originally thought, because this looks kind of, there's like standoffs. Okay, let's get into the actual box. So here are those support brackets. Yeah, it looks like it's ATX only. We'll find out. This piece attaches to the GPU, and it connects to this bar somehow. And I can see why it exists, because look at this thing. I don't know if the top-down camera is going to do it justice. We'll pull out the 7900 XTX to compare size, but this is pretty big and pretty thick. And then here is our NVIDIA connector, our fire hazard connector. Good news is we don't need to use it, because I actually put an ATX 5.0 power supply. I think it's 5.0. There's a Corsair power supply inside the Johnsbow case currently that actually supports native versions of that standard. Let's get out of here. So Gigabyte does have some nice tamper seals. They are adequately tamper sealy. Oh man. Jeez. This thing is huge. There's a peel here, isn't there? I can feel it. That is comically large, but kind of impressive. I do wonder why the 40 series is so large in comparison to the 7900 XTX, but I mean, it's probably going to cool great. These are RGB fans. They got an RGB ring around them. Full aluminum backplate. We got an OC and a silent mode. This heatsink is bigger than a lot of CPU heatsinks I've ever seen. It looks like it has two towers that actually go from, oh my God, how many heat pipes is that? An insane number of heat pipes and a full copper heat spreader. Wow. Okay, going along the top, we have one HDMI, 3 display port. That's pretty standard these days. We have a nice little error diode right on the sense wires and all of that fun stuff. Along back here are the mounting pieces to do the support bracket because, I mean, she's big. Gonna be hanging out like this. I do like this. You'll actually see that despite the cooler being so massive, our connector is actually recessed into it. So realistically, that is like the perfect bend radius to actually make sure that this doesn't like have too much tension on it, which is kind of great. She's sturdy. She's definitely well supported. Man, I'm impressed by this PCB, just on its design alone. I don't think I necessarily mentioned it earlier, but this is the Gigabyte Windforce Gaming OC. This GPU has 16 gigabytes of GDDR6X. As mentioned, it has an RGB fan installation right over here. There is an overclock and silence mode on the BIOS. It is a big card with big fans and a big heatsink. So I'm hoping that we have absolutely no issues cooling it. But now we got to get it in a case and take out the old GPU. But before we install it, we'll actually compare it to a 7900 XTX, the equivalent AMD GPU. And the one that we're going to be showing off is our Gaming Trio Classic. All right, take a look at these two next to each other. Oh my goodness. We got the big chungus of a GPU versus the not so big chungus. Now, here's something that's interesting though. They weigh about the same. This is denser. And you can tell from the fin density that yeah, that's definitely the case. How interesting. But yeah, these are some big GPUs, and this is an even bigger GPU. So let's get it inside the Johnsmo D31. So I was worried that this was not going to fit, but it does, and it fits uncomfortably well into this case. Now, we did need to actually switch out the PSU for the one that I did install into this case after I had originally built up the system, and that PSU has the power connectors slightly offset from the back of the PSU, making it so that there was just a little bit more room. It would be uncomfortably tight if I did not switch that out. And also having the built-in connector so that I didn't have to have a bunch of PCIe cables connected to an adapter hanging off the GPU was great. Now, there were some choices that I made that in hindsight I'm going to change. And that is because I was a little uncomfortable. The 12-volt high power connector, I ran it over the GPU instead of under the GPU because it was just so tight in there that I didn't want to accidentally clip the connector. And knowing how temperamental this plug is, any damage would be bad damage. Now, I am going to go back and probably zip tie it down to the bottom of the case to make it work, or get some custom cables so that I can get it a little bit tighter without having to worry about accidentally damaging anything. But other than that one little hiccup, everything just works and it looks pretty good. So it's inside the PC, it's running, we got drivers, and it's doing a pretty good job. In fact, we've already benchmarked it, and the results are right here on this clipboard. Very official of me, I know. But I did decide to run the brand new 3D Mark Nomad benchmark. It literally just came out. I don't know how good it is, but it does say good at a 6,627. It's probably because there's like nobody who's run this benchmark yet. So go ahead and benchmark your system if you got 3D Mark. I'd love to see how it competes. But let's talk about the other benchmark numbers. 3D Mark Speedway got a 7,408. Port Royal got an 18,166. Solar Bay got a 138,802. Time Spy got a GPU score of 28,481. Firestrike got a GPU score of 66,888. All very solid responses, and this did kind of land us in the okay to good performance range inside of the averages of the GPU. VR Mark Orange Room got a 19,179. Cyan room, a 6,605, and blue room, an 8,559. Unigine Heaven Basic preset was a 12,177. Heaven Extreme was a 9,101. Superposition 1080p Extreme was a 16,861. Superposition 4K was a 22,915. Superposition 8K was an 8,649. Superposition VR was a 9,922. Now I hear you, those are all synthetic benchmarks. How did it do while gaming? Because this is a gaming GPU, right? I mean, is it NVIDIA? Is this a gaming GPU anymore? Or is this an AI enhanced GPU? All right, let's start with a game that surprisingly was harder to run than most of the other games on the list. Witcher 3. Witcher 3 after the graphical enhancement update with Ultra RT, fancy. With Ultra RT came to 57 frames per second, which is really low. So we turned down the RT and we're able to get it down to 71 frames per second. Still a little low, so at Ultra, we were able to run it at 102 frames per second. These are some pretty difficult numbers for a game that's this old. So I came up with a custom preset where we started with the Ultra, we added in DLSS quality, and we turned on Hairworks because that was off by default. So we got 148 frames per second. This game really doesn't need the RT, nor does the RT really enhance it all that much. Now a game that does actually have pretty good RT implementation, Cyberpunk 2077. We did test the RT Overdrive, which gave us 102 frames per second. RT Ultra gave us 144.13, and Ultra 151.23. Now, interestingly enough, the Ultra preset runs FSR over DLSS, even though this is an NVIDIA GPU. Now, turning on the RT modes does enable DLSS, and it does have frame gen on by default. So 144 frames per second is kind of expected and would be my preferred way to play this. That would be the correct frame rate for my monitor's refresh rate. Forza Horizon 5 ran at Ultra at 109 frames per second. Borderlands 3 at its highest preset ran at 123.86 and Ultra at 128.43. Tiny Tina Wonderlands at its highest setting ran at 134.37, Ultra at 148.71. Horizon Zero Dawn ran at ultimate quality at 188 frames per second. Doom Eternal ran at Ultra Nightmare at 300 frames per second. Starfield with frame gen ran at 165 frames per second. And in New Atlantis, 155 frames per second. This is one heck of a GPU. Those numbers are nothing to scoff at. We were getting performance well above 100 FPS at 1440p ultra wide with ray tracing set to maximum, sometimes with assistance with DLSS and even FSR. But the point is, this GPU performs well. It performs really, really well. And it really does make AMD's competition, well, not seem as great. But there is a caveat to that. This GPU is about $200 cheaper than this GPU. It launched at the same price, but now it's cheaper. Other than that, this thing is a beast. It stays cool under pressure. It performs well out of the box without any overclocking or settings being tweaked. And that is a massive improvement over my experience with AMD. But it does seem that there is less that I can do to this GPU to gain extra performance, which is an advantage that does seem to still be in the court of AMD. And that might be changing. NVIDIA is launching a new application that I've already tested a little bit and we'll do a full video on later, which allows some of the features to be unlocked on this GPU that aren't currently unlocked. And I will say that a lot of how this thing performs comes down to just a very mature architecture that is very well iterated on, that doesn't have the same issues that are present on the Radeon GPUs. And on the topic of this Windforce GPU, there are things that I love and things that I don't love about it. I think that the cooler is great. I think that the design is great. And I do like how it has a specialized cutout to allow for a better bend radius on the connector for the NVIDIA GPU. I like how structural it is, and that it comes with a GPU support bracket that, if I had an ATX system, would work pretty well. The things I don't like are specifically the implementation of RGB. And it's not because Gigabyte did a bad job designing the RGB. In practice, this is pretty tasteful. It's gonna look great if you could see it. Problem is, Gigabyte's RGB Fusion software can't find this GPU. And because it can't find it, Razer, which is compatible with the Gigabyte RGB Fusion software, cannot find it either. Which means that, unfortunately, I can't get the RGB to work. So it's set to its default, and that default is unfortunately kind of annoying. The RGB stays off until the fans start to spin up, and then it just rainbow lights. It's not a great choice. I would have just gone with a steady color Gigabyte, something like white, which is neutral when it's not being controlled. I know that blinking RGB lights is like a thing that every company does, but I wish they would just pick something neutral to just start with, especially when your software doesn't work. MSI, I haven't had a problem with since they fixed theirs. So Gigabyte, I have full faith that you can do it. So this GPU is a beast. It was really easy to install, and Gigabyte did a good job of making it so that you didn't have as much of a risk of creating a fire. Overall, I do recommend it to a lot of newer PC builders, especially over the AMD ones, because there's less troubleshooting. I didn't have any problems installing the software, getting it going out of the box. Absolutely nothing. It's very beginner friendly. Is it very expensive? Yes. $1,000 is nothing to scoff at. And realistically, if you're a beginner, you probably should drop down to the 60 or 70 series over the 80 series. If you had the money to spend and you were able to get it, it is a really, really good GPU. Just make sure that your monitor has a refresh rate that can utilize these extra FPS and a resolution that can also utilize the extra resolution. Because if you're putting this on a 1080-60 monitor, it's going to be a total waste. But that is where we're ending today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Wolfie, out.